My name is Rita Alice Ware. Was Rita Alice Ware. I was born on May 29th, 1928. And I've saved a few pictures of my family as I remember them. I'll start with a picture of the family. Now, in my mother's lap is the child that died. Her name was Beverly. She was a blue baby. And she lived until she was 7 years old, and then she died of spinal meningitis. The next smallest kid is me. On the right side of my mother is my sister Gloria, redhead. She was bright redhead. Followed by my sister Gwen. And my brother, his name actually was Harold B. Ware, but he looked so much like my dad when he was a kid that grandmother called him a little Leo, so Leo stuck in his mind, so he was called, behind my mother is my dad. And I believe this was at Christmas, near Christmas time, that we had a family picture taken. Now, my brother, Leo, when he turned 18, he was one of the ones that were so gifted to be one of the ones that are taken into the Army. They were sent to the Army, and he spent some time over in the Pearl Islands, hating it. Okay. So, and at the time, my dad was, I don't know, he worked different things. And seeing that I was born in 1928, I was part of when people lost all their money. Depression. So he worked minor jobs and things, and it was kind of tight, but it was tight for everybody. Since Mother and Dad had so many children, and during the Depression, we lived in different places. We never lived in a black neighborhood. We had to find places that we could afford. And so I was raised around, one place was Sicilian Italianos. This is in Cleveland, and the schools that I went to, there was maybe one or two of us in school. So we lived in one area called Mount Pleasant, and that was where a lot of Sicilian Italianos, lived. And then another time we lived in a Jewish neighborhood with a synagogue and the rituals and the whole thing. But the biggest problem why we moved in different places is that Papa and Mother would live wherever they could, and sometimes they would rent to us because the houses were kind of dumpy and then. But actually, when we got through fixing them up, we always fixed them up. They'd sell them off from under us. So we lived in a number of different places, until we finally moved into the Jewish neighborhood. The schools that I went to were mostly Jewish. On the Jewish holidays, there was, maybe one or two people. But the school itself was known for in Cleveland for one of the top educational places. My dad, he was working for the Army Map Service. He got different honors and different gifts and things from the government for what he did. And we found out later from the records from the map service that he was one of those Mensa. He was a genius. He never finished school. As a matter of fact, what happened, when he was a child, his father died. He fell off from a ladder and he broke his back and he died. So his mother, with five children, she worked herself to death. So my dad and his brothers and his sister were orphans in the teenage. Pop had one brother, Uncle Gene, that he stayed in New York. He was one of their top detectives. You'd have to know more about him. It's quite a story about him. Gene was the oldest. Pop, my dad, was the next. Uncle Chappie, each one looked different. Uncle Gene was kind of brown, but he wasn't dark brown. Then there's my dad, who didn't look black at all. Uncle Chappie looked Hispanic. The next brother, the youngest brother, looked totally white. That was Uncle Herbert. Okay, and then the youngest one was Aunt Alice. And so the boys, as boys, they were on their own, and they hoboed back and forth across the country on riding the rails. As a matter of fact, my dad used to tell us all these tales about what rails you rode, and he stayed away from the hot box and stuff. He made it so interesting that as a girl I wanted to do it too. And I was told, of course, you're a female, you can't do so and so. But he always tell us, when you ride the rails, you get off. You find some way to get off before you got to certain towns, because there was cops who were looking for hobos and things. And of course, he would tell us all about the camps that you stopped at. There was a bunch of people that, almost like the homeless now, they had hobo camps and things, and they knew each other, and there's certain stops and things, it was very interesting. But the odd thing about, I don't know if it's believable for most people, but the whole family were kind of odd back then, for the simple reason Uncle Gene knew things that nobody would know. And there was one time when we were traveling, and my husband, Walker Lobbins, when he went to the Army, he left his car with us. And so my dad decided that he was going to surprise Uncle Gene and drive to New York from Cleveland. It was going to be a surprise. And Uncle Gene called the night before and says, when you come out here, don't take and it wasn't called a freeway then, but anyhow, don't take that road. And so Papa, he knew things. As a matter of fact, I think Uncle Gene, a couple of times, Pop said when they were hoboing, he would call Uncle Gene, and Uncle Gene would say, in so-and-so state, Uncle so-and-so died, and he just, described. As a matter of fact, he was so good at that. It's like, after I learned about the Lord, I was wondering, okay, now whose side was all this? Whose side was all this? Yeah. Because there was all kinds of things that Pop would say, and he wasn't an exaggerator, and it's like, okay, but it was very interesting. My dad, when he started traveling by himself, he went and stayed in a place, where the young man stayed. My grandmother had a house that she rented to, guys that had rooms and things, and this is where they stayed. Well, that's where Mother met Pop, and they ended up getting married, but they were still young, quite young, As a matter of fact, with Mother's mother, she was a black woman at a time when women, black and white women, did not run things. So my grandmother had about 5 husbands, 2 or 3 homes, on her own. But what she would do back at the time, she'd buy a house, and this one she bought, she decided she was going to do laundry. Back when they had no dryers or anything, you just washed the clothes and took them, hung out on the line. You came back and you ironed them, everything, the sheets and pillowcase and everything. She decided she was going to start and this she set up in her basement. But her clientele were all rich white. The guys, as a matter of fact, the one guy customer she had owned 2 or 3 railroads. So she'd do, as a matter of fact, sometimes I remember her showing me as a kid, showing me this laundry. You'd figure that rich people would have brand new stuff, but this guy was such a cheapskate that she'd mend his underwear or she'd mend, this stuff. But she did so well. This is what she paid for her homes and things. Anything she touched, money came to her. As a matter of fact, there was one time when she had one customer that wasn't really rich, but he was, he wasn't poor, but anyhow, and she charged him more than he thought she should charge. So she sent the police there, and grandmother took him down the basement, showed him these things. The policeman ended up having her do his laundry. She just had a way of making money. Grandmother loved money. She might give for Christmas, she'd give a big dinner for us and other people that she knew. But there was never a time when mother needed money that grandmother would give her any. What she would do, she'd say, Effie, and that's what my mother's name was, Effie. Effie, why don't you have your kids come over on the weekend? And we knew what on the weekend would do. You took the rugs out, put them on the clothesline. There was a thing that you beat the rugs, beat the dust out of the rugs. The curtains and the drapes had to come down. There was a curtain stretcher. Everything had to come down. So there was a major, when you could open up the windows and things, so weather had just finally gotten decent, you'd open up the windows and all. And so that's what she wanted us to do, or clean the rugs or something. And it was nothing for us to be cleaning something, or, like a rug that was right by the door. You pick it up and there's money. She was making so much money that she'd hide it and she'd forget. But there was, so she was that kind of a woman. But I remember my dad laughing different times because mother would tell him, mother got taken by a scam. She was very, very gullible.
So what was her name?
Carrie Brown. One time she was Carrie Brown, then the next time she was Carrie something else, and the next time she was Carrie. Sure. And she always had the biggest gun I've ever seen in my life. Yeah, and she slept with it. She had a tenement house and but I remember this one funny story that somebody said that one time somebody did get to her, and when he almost got to her, what she did with the gun, she got so excited she threw it. Okay. It shows the family standing beside the car that we had, and I don't know how Papa always had a car. But our entertainment at the time was our dad would take us different places. I remember going to Wheeling, West Virginia, to see the paddle boats go up and down the river, and the different things that we did. Or they take the kids, and we go out on the farm, out on the road, and find a nice, like somebody's enclosure, their farmland, and climb over the fence. If it was a place that had apples or something, We always helped ourselves to apples. What we do most of the time, we were having a picnic. So Mother would bring the food, but that's how we would spend our time on the, weekends. So he would always take us someplace very, very interesting. And so as a result, we were introduced to so many different things. I remember going to there was a national park that wasn't too far from us. And we just got out there and walk, and Pop would show us different things, explain to us different things. And Mother, I can remember so often that we'd go looking for chrysalises or turn over a rock and show us something, or just, it was just walk and spend time outside. We were always in an area where we were the first blacks or something, so as all of us kids, it was understood that after we finished our work or wash dishes and things, we'd sit out on the porch and talk softly or sing or play some little game or something, but never were we ever to run loose, Plus, when we were coming up, it's like we moved in this house and it's tired looking at, and our job as kids, everybody was given a job. You dug the gardens, you fixed the so-and-so, you did everything. It was understood that, like my brother Leo, we had a coal furnace, and everybody had a coal bin in Ohio, in the basement. And so the coal man would come and he'd dump the coal in the driveway, and it was your job to shovel it into the coal bin. That was Leo's job. Also, his job was also to keep the furnace burning, because like you may wake up in the morning and it's 10 below. You better have the furnace better not have gone out. He was, so he had to been about 17, because he got drafted at 18. I think he was one of the first ones they took. And you talk about somebody dragging, holding on. It's like, no, he hated it.
So what was your job?
Okay, mine was cleaning the kitchen. Mother and Pop both had to work. Now, what Mother would do, she did what she could. She'd go to white people's homes and she'd do the laundry, or she'd do whatever had to be done, and then, get home. So Pop was gone, Mother was gone, and we had jobs. When Mother got home, if she gave you the kitchen to clean, it better be clean. It better be clean. And then she'd go, everything had to be perfect. Leo had a job, Gwen had a job to do it. You go to school in your school clothes, you come home, you take those clothes off, you put them, and you got to work. You got what somebody told you to do done, then you played. We had the first television, we had the first radio. What Pop would do, he'd get into contests that the newspaper was running, and he'd win them. And so I can remember Joe Louis was fighting, and the whole neighborhood, Pop pushed the radio out on the porch so that everybody could hear. Pop was very political. He'd read the newspaper. If there was something that he disagreed with, he'd write a letter protesting. And a number of times the family got threatened. But he was a person that if he had something to say, he would write a letter to the editor. He would love this time now. He would be just, I hate it, but he would be so happy he'd be right into the latest thing. From the left is my sister Gwen. She was the oldest. Then I'm the little one, and Gloria, my sister, and then Leo, my brother. And like I said, we were a very, very close family. Mother and Pop were such good people, and the bad thing about Pop was his birth certificate said Caucasian, but when he married Mother, he says, I am not Caucasian. so he had it changed. Well, a couple of jobs he had were important jobs. And then when they realized that this guy was black, he'd lose his job, or else somebody else would, take over. So he did what he never was a protester as far as, you know, how come this is so and so and so. So as a rule, I can remember a couple of places when he was working when we were kids, like Christmas is like mother depended on Pop getting money for Christmas. She'd take the money as he got home and go right straight out. She had to buy presents. We ended up in a number of years closing the stores as she got what she could, in in general. And then the little raggedy Christmas trees, just as they were so glad to get rid of them, we put everything up. And nobody ever felt like you were out of anything. We were so happy. So it was all good. And I have to really praise Pop and Mother. With 7 kids, what they must have gone through. Before Pop retired, now I'm grown then, and he was working for a company that repaired motors, big motors, but when they had a major motor in one of these businesses, they couldn't take it out. Pop went and saw to it. And he would either do the thing or he would find this problem. He's the only black, and the head guy died, and they needed somebody to take over. They chose somebody else. But every weekend, and it used to run Mother crazy because the guy, he took over the position, but he'd come every weekend to ask Pop how to work so and so. I can remember Pop, and he'd tell him, and Mother would be saying, he's getting paid for your head. Oh, well, Mom, this is just the way it is. Back then, it was understood that the young are to be seen and not heard. And when adults were talking something serious, go play. So a lot of times you've missed some of the details about what, kids were not allowed to stand and, like they do now, listen to this, that, and other. So there's some details that, that's none of your business, just go play, type of thing. So there's a lot of details that I never understood. And they should have been held down so everybody, the people coming, would know. But as a matter of fact, what's so amazing? Thank God for photographs, because if you didn't have photographs, you wouldn't know anything, because it goes. This is my mother. This is before she got married. So every picture. As a matter of fact, she never got much of a chance to live with her dad because her mom decided that I'm a racehorse and he's a mule. So he ended up living in Ravenna, Ohio, after she divorced him. And Mother lived in Cleveland. She'd go visit him, but his name was Ben Fisher. He was just the sweetest person. But Mother never got a chance to live with him. But he worked for the woman that owned Ravenna, Ohio at the time. It was just a little bit of a town, but she owned it. And he lived in a little dumpy place, but he was happy with it. I remember going to the woman's house a couple of times, when he went to show his grandkids. And she had all these from all over the world, all kind of beautiful carvings and furniture and different things, But he was just himself. And when he wasn't busy working, they said I remember one time we went to Ravenna, and mother was wondering where he was. Oh, Ben, yeah, he's down fishing. Anytime you don't see him at home, he's down, and he'd be just sitting there, just. But he married a woman that had freckles as big uh, as as quarters. But they were happy, and so I remember this one time mother decided, well, let's spend a weekend with grandpap. And we had a hard time, so it was me and Carol that spent a weekend. And we're city people, so we weren't used to, like, he didn't have a bathtub. He had a big tub that when it was on the weekend, you fill it full of water, and and then the bathroom was not the latest, greatest thing. And then, like, they were just country people. And when the meals, it's like you gotta be kidding type thing. I think we were like 13 years old, 14 something, but grandpa, I mean, he was just a pleasure to be around, but it's like, why are we here? When you're looking at, it used to be a coal bin, and it was redone by my dad for his workshop, and that way he entertained himself, fooling with things, fixing things, and plus, as part of the what helped fill in the money problem, because when we were living in the Italian neighborhood, Pop had a clock, electric clock, that said "Where's repairs," and it was in the window of our house, and people would come, and if they had whatever they had needed fixing, Pop would go, and he could, whether it was a clock, whether it was a radio, whether it was whatever it was, he could repair anything. In Cleveland, I was working at a loan company, riding the bus. I would take the bus home, and sometimes it was dark. So the thing that used to make me so happy, at one time, I would get off the bus and have to walk home, especially, you figure in the wintertime, this is Ohio, nobody's got their doors open, nobody's sitting on the porch, it's just you. And this one time, when you get off the bus, there was a building, the clothing store or something, I don't remember what it was, but there was a dark doorway. And I get off the bus and figuring, I had to go home. Pop would step out of the darkness and take me home. And that happened until he came down with cancer. And then he was kind of bedridden, This particular time I get off the bus, and evidently somebody had seen me get off before. There's a guy in a car. You get off the bus, and I turn the corner, and there's a bar that sits right on the corner, and usually there's guys behind it or something. Anyhow, Pop wasn't there. I start home, and the car starts to follow me. I'm walking, and no place I could disappear to. I kept walking. And at the time, well, that's part of the story, but at the time, when Mark and Colleen were little, before I left Walker, an incident came up, and he knocked me to the floor. At the time, I'm still crippled, and so I figured, you do it once, you'll never do it again. So in Chicago, they had all these cheap black newspapers and things, and they advertised for a gun. So I figured, okay, it was just a .22 little thing. They sent it, and I thought it was real, but it wasn't. It was just a stage gun, but it made noise. And nobody knows that it ain't real. You just act like it's real, So Anyhow, to make it long, throw that out. But I had this, I carried this in my purse. And so when the guy started following me, I just kept walking. Because actually, after polio, I still can't run. So running is out of the question. So I'm walking, and I just, he's ahead of me. And I just had this in my hand. I don't know whether when I passed under a light he saw it or what he saw. He jumps in the car and he burns some rubber. So when I get to home, Pop says, "What was that?" So I told him. So he says, "Okay, so what were you gonna do if that didn't go work?" I said, "I was gonna spit on him." And Pop thought I was. So actually, what happened is when I would try to say, "Pop, don't. You need to get up. You need to move around." As a matter of fact, his brother, when we visited him in New York, had told him, "Leo, you're going to be the next one. You'll be the next one." Also, when he came down with us, he just gave up and he stayed in bed. But the good thing about him not being able to get out of bed, I remember one year when I was coming up, Pop had a tooth that was, abscessed and everything. He went to the dentist and it was hurting so much. The guy wouldn't pull it out. He wouldn't pull it out. So Pop goes down the basement and pulls it out himself. I had figured when Pop found out that he had cancer, if he'd have been able to go down in the basement, he'd have done himself in rather than be bothered. That's the kind of person he was. When they finally took him to the hospital, the loan company that I worked for was about 2 blocks from the hospital. So often I would, I think, now, when Pop's gone, he's going to be gone. I tell my boss, I don't feel good, go down there and sit and we talk, and he'd tell me different things. And I was thinking, I'm going to spend some time with Pop. So finally when he ended up, they took him to another hospital and we all came out to visit him, and you could tell he's hanging on till we get out of there. So by the time we got in the car and got back home, he was gone. When I look back, it was such a good life. And we didn't have anything. As a matter of fact, I remember Mother, if somebody came to the back door needing something to eat, she'd find something to feed them. And so it was a different kind of life. Colleen was 1 year old and Mark was 3. And we lived in Chicago and in a project of all things. Well, I was in the habit of, when I got a chance to get away, I would take a train to Cleveland and visit Mother and Pop. And this particular time, they were out with the sugar cube that they had the polio, that they give them a sugar cube with the polio virus on it. And that was it. And at that time, they called polio, it was called infantile paralysis. It wasn't called polio. So this particular time, I was slated to go to Cleveland. And in the afternoon, I had the kids in the park, and they were giving the sugar cubes. So I had both of the kids with the sugar cubes. In the evening, I took the train to Cleveland and slept with the kids in the bed with them. When I got up in the morning, I had figured, well, since I was there and the rest of the family was there, we were going to have a party that night. Mother and Pop had already slated a trip to out of town. I've forgotten where they were going. But, so they, so they said, "Oh, well, we didn't know you're coming." I said, "Well, you go on, take your trip. It's no big deal, it's just for a weekend." So get up in the morning, I'm fixing spaghetti for the evening. Before noon got there, I had it. I had polio. And the the symptoms that you had is like there's a pain in your spine, and then your whole body reacted. And so, to make a long story short, for some reason, another pop on this trip, he told Mother, I don't know, I think we need to get home. I don't know, let's just head back. So they headed back. By that time, it was full bloom, fever and the whole thing. And so I had said at one time about my dad having been hoboed when he was a young man. He had told us that every camp had a supply of turpentine, and that was the medicine they used. He said because sometimes a guy would fall off a train or so he'd cut himself or something. That was what they used. And so Mother gets put some hot water in a bathtub, pours turpentine in the water, put the towels on my back as hot as I could stand them. She just keep putting there, and Pop called and set me up with the hospital. Well, when I got there, they took the spine tap, and they told Mother that I'd never walk again because there's so many, this thing was so through my system. And even until they released me, the doctors were still following me around trying to figure out now, how did I revive? But
How long were you in the hospital?
6 months. And so when I was in the hospital 6 months, Mother and Pop saw to Mark and Colleen. And what they would do, Colleen was still little, and so luckily they gave me a hospital room that had a window overlooking where the parking was. So Pop would come and he'd hold up Colleen so that I could wave to her. One doctor told Mother if I had anything except polio, that I would have to pay 6 months in a hospital with a top care, with the therapy and everything. Never had to pay anything. The March of Dimes paid. They even paid for me to take Mark and Colleen at Christmas time back to Chicago to be with the dad. If I had wanted my hair done, they would have done it. If I wanted it, whatever it was, they took care of it. They even gave me a back brace because, my back was really bothered. I had a hard time even sitting up. When I had finally went back to Chicago to regain my life, and I had finally taken off the back brace. Well, I found out I was pregnant. There'd have been a couple of other kids. I'd have had 5 kids. But it was like, I just got out of my, what am I going to do? I can't. So Walker set me up with anybody that has to go to somebody that does abortion. It's awful. It's bad. He does his little deal at his office. Because I didn't know I can't. Turns out that he blew it, and I was bleeding to death. So Walker calls him, and he comes to the place. Meanest man you ever saw. He tried his best to hurt me, and but it had to be done. I didn't know that much about abortions and things, but it's like, what do I do? Do I go back? You know what? I can't wear a back brace. Can I take this deal? But I realized that You know, these, I feel sorry for somebody that has to have it done. But I didn't feel guilty about it because, you know, what am I going to do? Now, there was one, you'd have had a brother, but now this wasn't an abortion. Poor Jones I marry a guy that has been a bachelor. Now he's got 3 kids and a wife. And he's a cab driver and he's doing the best he can and this, that, other. I'm having a hard time. The man's miserable with all this, that, and other. No, no. And so it aborted itself. You know, it was just a miscarriage. So I would have had 5 kids. You know, you realize that, okay, you let yourself become pregnant or something happens, the guy don't even have to, he can claim it ain't his. And when I left Walker, I've got 2 kids. And it's necessary, you know, I can't just go along with what he's doing. The kids need a roof over their head. The kids do not deserve this project. And the roaches are running and there's something that's, you know, no. And I wasn't about to be a single mama because I'm still not back to, I can either be a good mama or a good worker. I can't be both. I need help. If I hadn't had responsibility, ain't no way I remarry. Because Jones, you know, I can't be mad at Jones because he don't hug me or say, you know, I'm sorry, I love you, or say, he's never said I love you. But I got 2 kids. I need you. So when I look back at it now, it's like, Lord, put me here to see this man and to bless him. There would be times when he'd be sitting there growling at me because I'm too involved. Just like if you see somebody doing something wrong, you know, don't get involved in it. Well, you are involved in it. And that bothered him, you know. So at one time when we were going through this, and I was doing the ceramics and things, and that was my outlet. Because there's no way I could even sit and do these now. I had a wonderful family.